Let's talk about the plot of Weekend at Bernie's being played out in the White House as we speak. Now, I don't know whether you've seen the film Weekend at Bernie's, but it's about a couple of guys who have to pretend that a dead man isn't dead for a weekend, or I don't know, get his inheritance or something. I can't remember. I was a kid when I watched it last. But the point is, the whole thing is comedic shenanigans as they're running around trying to make it look like this dead guy's still alive. And honestly, that's what the Biden administration is turning into. And it's quite obvious that Kamala Harris is launching some kind of bid for power. But it isn't just Kamala Harris. It's the entire network, I suppose we'll call it. I mean, in Time magazine, they called it a cabal, but I don't feel I can call it that. So we'll say network around that can be labeled as the White House, however we are describing this. But anyway, so this is an article from The Guardian in 2016, and it's useful because it's got a series of opinions from the kind of people who would support such an operation. This, as they frame it, is Kamala Harris becoming America's first female, first black, and first South Asian American vice president, which is very important. Bakari Sellers, who's a personal friend of hers and also a lawyer, says it will be an amazing moment for Harris and her sister Maya, and this is, she says, personally going to be an awesome feeling. Then she'll have a sense of history, because from the historical perspective, there's so many women who chipped away at the glass ceiling and now she's broken it. I think that she will feel the weight of that history on her shoulders. Total cringe. Manisha Sinha, a history professor at the University of Connecticut and an author of a book called The Slave's Cause, A History of Abolition, said that it's galvanized enthusiasm among black women, Indian American and Asian American communities. No evidence of that, of course. Kamala Harris is deeply unpopular generally. Dropped out of the primary race, went on like 5% really early on. Everyone hates her. Then how she ended up here.
Even among Democrats, not entirely popular.
Not popular at all. Like, again, 5 to 10% popularity, approval rating among Democrats. Like, that's really unpopular. But she's well connected and she's got the right sort of background and she's got the right promotion here. But anyway, this is the thing. So she's a symbol to the rest of the world that has been watching the United States in horror. Just to have her and Biden take over is really important. It signals to the world that we are an interracial democracy, and that certainly her election is a rejection of the kind of white supremacist politics that Trump brought back into vogue. No one thinks that. No one thinks that. But she warns, though, that, of course, people who oppose to this will demonstrate a tremendous racist backlash. So if you oppose the identity politics of this and it being forced into the White House and it being the main framing of the thing, then you're just a racist. Obviously, you just hate black, South Asian women. Clearly. Anyway, they say that her role is going to be far from symbolic, though, because she's going to, and they say, wield considerable power. Biden has vowed that Harris will be the last person in the room making important decisions, modelled on his relationship as vice president with Obama. But the thing is, no one thought that Joe Biden was stealing office from Obama. Well, that's just not how it worked. And I'll explain why in a minute. Jennifer Lawless, a professor of politics at the University of Virginia, said that Harris's pivotal role in the Senate means she will be cast in a very different light than previous vice presidents. See the foreshadowing here. This is back in January. Oh, yeah, well, she's going to have a lot of power. It'll be very different from previous vice presidents. If you don't like it, you're a racist. Do you see how this is all being set up? The narrative, all the narrative points are coming together. That's why this is such a useful article. But she says, I can't remember another time in contemporary history, there isn't one, where the vice president is basically the person determining whether legislation gets to the president's desk. That's very interesting, isn't it? That's very interesting. Really, should the vice president be curating the presidency for the president? Obviously, this hasn't happened in the past. This wasn't the same with Obama and Joe Biden. This wasn't Trump and Pence or any of the ones before within living memory. So why is it okay now? There's a lot of things that are new and different with this presidency because it's totally on the up and up.
If Biden's just a rubber stamp on something that goes through her, well, then she's the one on top.
Yes.
I mean, it actually makes me think of our system for a little bit. Like the Queen here being a rubber stamp for whatever the other executives, so Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister,
And that's the situation they seem to be saying is now the case in the United States, that Kamala is the prime minister and Biden's just the king who rubber stamps things.
That's exactly what we're being told by The Guardian and these experts. Anyway, so moving on to the month later, February, literally a month later, Kamala Harris is really settling into this role of being in charge. She's calling foreign leaders, having independent private calls with them. So Joe Biden isn't even in the room while she's talking to Trudeau and Macron about the United States foreign policy and how they're going to deal with their allies. But also what's interesting is that...
She sent him to bed or something?
Well, that's the question. Who knows? He just wasn't there. I guess he put a lid on it. He's an old man. He needs his rest. He did apparently have a broken foot at some point as well. So, he probably needs to rest up. But anyway, she takes the calls. But, of course, Pence never did. He didn't take, or very rarely took calls of foreign leaders. And then didn't speak on behalf of Trump. He only spoke on his own behalf, which is really weird. But this is what we're told about from one Republican senator, right? So Senator Kevin Cramer said that Biden had invited Republican senators to the White House to reach a bipartisan deal on coronavirus relief in February. It was Ron Klain, his chief of staff, not the president, who set the tone of the meeting. Biden was apparently very well engaged and prepared for the meeting, said Kevin Cramer, but he also heard that his chief of staff stood at the back of the room and shook his head no for every Republican point. And with Miss Harris taking the lead in diplomacy and the White House chief of staff, Ron Klain, dominating the outcome of White House meetings, one has to wonder, as the Washington Times asks, who is calling the shots at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? Jem Psaki told reporters that the president himself would tell you that we keep him pretty busy and he has a full schedule this week. Who's we? We keep him busy. Kamala Harris curates the legislation that gets to his desk. The Ron Klain, the White House chief of staff, is organizing and dominating all of these White House meetings. You can see the outline, the structure of the organization around Biden in the center, who apparently just seems to literally, as you say, just be rubber stamping whatever these people are making him do. And they keep him pretty busy. So anyway, moving on, just to hammer the point home on the international diplomatic role, Joel Goldstein, the author of The White House Vice Presidency, The Path to Significance, Mondale to Biden, says that Biden basically has established his plans and signals his plans to reestablish the global connection after Trump's America First doctrine. And so Harris has spoken to Trudeau, World Health Organization Director General Tedros, and meets regularly with Antony Blinken, as well as speaking to Macron, as we saw in the past one. So you can see how the network is formed, and Kamala Harris has essentially put herself in front, or we say the power behind the throne with Joe Biden. She's the one who all of the connections are actually going to, but it's Biden's face that's on the front of all of this. Isn't that interesting? All of this is just out there. This is all demonstrable.
Means a left-wing outlets as well, with The Guardian there.
Well, it's left and right-wing people.
Yeah, but the fact that the left-wing outlet like The Guardian could say that openly, that tells you that they accepted, this is the case.
Yeah, this is the case, and they know this is the case. And Harris is well positioned for this because she spent time on the Senate Select Committee and the Intelligence and Homeland Security Committee, so she has got all of these connections. So she's the right place and the right time with the right connections to enact what I guess we'll call the internationalist agenda, which is what they're talking about with meeting with all of these international NGOs. But anyway, going on to last month, so in fact, what month are we in? No, we're in April now. Oh, God. Last month, again, like a month later, and people are beginning to notice that it's weird how much time Kamala Harris spends around Joe Biden. I mean, one commentator on Twitter describes her as a vulture circling around him. And if we can just scroll through some of these pictures, John, for anyone listening, I'll just read out some of the quotes. But it's really interesting. So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris spend a lot of time together these days. They ride around in cars telling people to mask up together. They always seem to be seen at public meetings together. They go on the road and speak about public events and sell a COVID relief package that had already been passed together. Incidentally, on that, they basically ignored Republican objections. The bosom buddies travel on Marine One together. The only time you don't see Kamala is when Biden needs her help climbing up the stairs. This is the only time, really, in recent public events that she hadn't been present. And that's interesting because as vice president, Biden himself rarely traveled with Obama, right? As Politico reported in 2013, anytime the president or vice president travel outside of Washington, they face increased risks security-wise, and having them both traveling at the same time presents a risk that most administrations don't take. If something tragic could happen to both of them, the presidency would be left in the hands of the third in presidential line of succession, which is incidentally Nancy Pelosi. So maybe Pelosi's playing the long game here. But the point is...
Well, she's going to Diana both of them.
Well, I'm not saying that she is, but, I mean, you know, if we end up with President Pelosi at some point, just saying, it's the pieces are all aligned for her to just check on the board. But anyway, the point is, it's weird that she spends so much personal time in the presence of Joe Biden, especially when they're traveling around and doing things. They should be separately governing. You know, the vice president should be going off and doing, you know, speeches or whatever it is, you know, as the president's sort of vanguard, I guess. But it's weird. And it just seems to imply a level of direct control that the vice president has never previously had over the president. And then on the 2 days later after this, in fact, it was released, it was revealed, although not officially notified, but it was someone within the Biden administration who notified the Washington Times and was like, hey, by the way, it was a report, outspoken, but the Washington Times are reporting on it. A top White House communications team member has told us that there was an email sent directing that all official usage at all official agencies refer to the Biden administration as the Biden-Harris administration. That's weird. And again, if we're looking at this from the position of the vice president seizing power from the president and essentially taking over the presidency, well, this would be a way of, again, indicating that that is happening. Why should the vice president have this kind of prominence over the president?
And you would very rarely hear Trump-Pence administration. It was always the Trump administration.
Always the Trump administration. Always the Obama administration. Always the Clinton administration. The Bush administration. You know, go back as far as you want. It's never the president and vice president administration. So this is very, very interesting and very revealing, obviously.
Someone in the chat, at least they didn't do Harris-Biden administration.
I mean, thank God for small mercies, I suppose. Maybe that would have been a step just too far. But yeah, please be sure to refer to the current administration as the Biden-Harris administration in all official public communications the directive read. So there we go. That's pretty much open and shut. And then we come to the immigration crisis. Now, we've reported on the immigration crisis. We covered it in podcast 80. We've got a bunch of articles, 90 even. We've got a bunch of articles because in this podcast, we show that Joe Biden is himself causing the immigrant crisis. It's his rhetoric regarding immigration that is causing the immigrants to come. And we show videos of the immigrants saying, well, I wouldn't have come under Trump because he would have just built a wall and told me to go home. But Joe Biden's going to let me in because he said he was going to let me in. Therefore, I have come. And that means not just young, adventurous men, but also families with women and children. 100,000 people in March alone have turned up, which is something 2 or 3 times the number that they usually get per month. John's just put, can you put that up on the screen? So John's, where's this from though? This is just a protester.
I was looking for a picture for thumbnail and I put Biden, Harris,
right, okay.
And that popped up.
So this is some Democrat side in which they've got Biden, Harris on one side, and on the other side you've got Harris, Biden.
And then Trump Pence out now. So it's obviously a campaigning thing. So it's not an official thing. Or at least, well, I mean, it might be. It looked high quality, but anyway. So the reason I bring all of this up is to build up to an article that CNN published yesterday, which is amazing, absolutely amazing, because this is the full mask off thing. Point. So the article's called White House Backtracks After Biden Calls Border Situation a Crisis. Now, I think by any reasonable definition, it actually is a crisis. And so when Joe Biden was speaking to reporters after a round of golf at the Wilmington Country Club, he said this: "We're going to increase the numbers. The problem was that the refugee part was working on the crisis that ended up on the border with young people, and we couldn't do 2 things at once, and now we're going to increase the numbers, the number of people who are helping, I presume." Fairly decent description of events, all things considered. And this was apparently something that the White House decided to repudiate. Right? So the president's use of the crisis label doesn't represent the administration's official position, the White House said on Monday in regards to him saying this. That's incredible. That is just, no, we don't agree with the president. Right, carry on, Mr. President. What the hell? How could that be said? The the administration that bears his name does not agree with the president, and we will contradict and refute him to the public.
So President Biden, there's a crisis on the border. Biden administration, no, there isn't. President Biden's wrong.
Yes.
And that's not our position.
Literally, the crisis label does not represent the Biden administration's official position. Say the Biden administration in contradiction to the president.
Biden-Harris administration.
The Biden-Harris administration, I apologize. That's
like the pronouns.
That's such but that is a wild position to be in. I mean, like, I don't even know how to compare it. Like, if Elon Musk came out and was like, yeah, so SpaceX is going to fly a man to Mars, and then you just got a statement from the official SpaceX account saying Elon Musk doesn't represent SpaceX. You're like, what? Of course he does. He's your CEO. How could he not? How are his statements not representative? Whose statements are, then? You know, who wrote this? Who is contradicting him? Who does represent the Biden-Harris administration, if not Joe Biden? That's the question. And anyway, so they say there's no change in position. Children coming to our border seeking refuge from violence, economic hardships, and other dire circumstances is not a crisis. But Biden was apparently, the official who said this, unnamed official who said this, said that Biden was referring to the crisis in Central America as the dire circumstances that people are fleeing from, not the federal government's response. And it's like, okay, that's all well and good, but who is saying this? Who is making this decision? The party has said that actually Big Brother's position is not what it is. You know, Big Brother was wrong and was misspoken, and you shall now just accept the party's position on this. Like, who's making?
Joseph Stalin doesn't represent the position of the Soviet Union.
Exactly, exactly. And Jen Psaki made the same distinction on Monday afternoon. So who's she taking orders from? It apparently is not from Joe Biden. And they feel that they have enough authority to be able to contradict the president in his own statements. So who are they taking their marching orders from? Like I said, this is, in my opinion, the biggest mask-off moment so far. I don't know how else you could describe it, and I would love to hear the answer to these questions.
So my charitable interpretation, shall we say, would be that they've been trying to ignore the situation at the border for as long as possible. And now they're saying, you know, he's messed up by saying the word crisis, and they're like, no, we were told not to say that word. But I must say, even after he's done that blunder, you wouldn't back down. You'd be like, no, the president's right. Why would you disavow
Why
his
even
statements?
bring it up?
Well,
like, why
if
say
it is a blunder, right? They're trying to avoid the word crisis.
Yeah.
He uses it. I don't know why you wouldn't just back him up at that point. Like, why would you try and throw his own words under the bus?
Well, that's the point. Like, why is it important that they contradict and correct him on this? Because if Joe Biden says the word crisis once, if they were stage managing him behind the scenes, which I assume they are, why couldn't they just ignore that? And then when he comes back in, be like, next time don't use the crisis word. If that makes it sound weak, that makes it sound like we don't have it under control. And that's what the complaint is. It does make them sound like they're weak, like they've made a mistake, like the party is fallible.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, they're literally at the position where they want to build the wall again.
Literally. Yeah, exactly. But the point is, they're trying to project this kind of unvarnished position of strength where nothing bad ever happens and all bad things are because of forces outside of the party. I mean, they are actually taking on the position of INGSOC here. And it's not wrong to say that your administration is facing a crisis. Like, it's not even wrong to admit that maybe Biden made a mistake by hyping up the rhetoric. But if you can never be wrong, then any amount of mistake is undermining your entire case. And so what they're trying to do is be like, no, there was nothing to see here. There was no crisis. You know, circle the wagons and everyone's like, it's a big display of weakness.
Yeah, I mean, any government doesn't want to face up to its mistakes. That's one thing. But I mean, what I would have expected is him after saying that, if, you know, he's your guy and he's the guy in charge, you'd back him up completely and say, yeah, and we're going to deal with that crisis. We're going to do this and that. And, you know, we're going to fund foreign aid over there would be the left-wing response to stop them coming or something like this.
We're going to build more migrant camps. We're going to send them aid. There are loads of things that from a left-wing position you could back him up on. You can do to actually strengthen your position. But instead what they did is weaken their position and revealed their hand. And been like, yeah, well, you know, don't listen to this doddering old fool. What he doesn't,
never heard of him.
He doesn't speak for us, you know. And it's like, it's mad. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.